I remember the taste of recycled air mixed with incense when I first carved the 8-pointed star into my flesh. My name is Marcus Vrel, former factory worker of Hive Tertius, now devoted servant of the dark gods. They branded me heretic, traitor, damned. You think that makes me evil, but you don't know what I've seen. You don't know what it's like to watch your children starve while the Imperium's golden throne devours 1,000 psychers daily just to keep a corpse breathing. You don't understand the desperation that makes a man look into the warp and say yes when something looks back. The Inquisition will tell you I'm a monster who chose damnation freely. They're wrong. I chose survival. I chose power when powerlessness had crushed me for 43 years. And now, as I feel my body changing, as reality itself begins to reject me, I'll tell you what they don't want you to know about the men and women who turn from the Emperor's light. This is my testimony, delivered before the transformation completes. Chapter 1. The Grey Life Hive. Tertius stretches 17 miles into the polluted sky of Kronwald Prime, a monument to humanity's industrial desperation. I lived on level 47, which sounds impressive until you realize there are 312 levels total, and anything below level 200 might as well be the warp itself. The Emperor protects, they tell us. From my vantage point, pressed into a HAB unit measuring 12 feet by 8 feet with my wife Sarah and our 2 children, his protection felt remarkably similar to indifference. My work shift began at 0400 every day. The alarm klaxon screamed through our paper-thin walls, and I'd extract myself from the sleeping mat without waking the children. Sarah would already be awake, her eyes hollow from another sleepless night. We'd stopped talking about the ration cuts 3 months ago. What was there to say? The administratum had determined that our sector's quotas weren't being met, so our food allotment dropped by 30%. The children cried themselves to sleep hungry. We pretended not to hear. The walk to Factory Complex 97 Alpha took 40 minutes through corridors that hadn't seen maintenance in decades. Water dripped from corroded pipes overhead, and every 4th lumen strip was dead, creating pools of shadow where desperate people did desperate things. I kept my head down, my identification papers ready, my faith in the Emperor, a mantra I repeated without feeling. The Emperor protects. The Emperor provides. The Emperor knows all. My station was Bolt Press Operator 666 on line 42. 16 hours a day, I fed metal stock into a machine that stamped components for lasguns destined for guard regiments I'd never see, fighting wars on planets I'd never visit, for an Imperium that had forgotten my name if it ever knew it. The noise was incredible. A constant thunder that made my teeth vibrate and my ears ring, even through the inadequate hearing protection. The heat from the industrial presses turned the factory floor into a vision of hell, temperatures hovering around 110 degrees standard Terran. There were 6,000 workers in Complex 97 Alpha alone. We were interchangeable parts in the Imperial machine, and everyone knew it. When Hadric fell into press 47 3 months back, they hosed down the mechanism, assigned his station to Peter from sub-level 59, and adjusted production logs. Hadric's wife received a notification of his death and a stipend of 12 thrones, enough to feed their family for perhaps 2 weeks, if they ate nothing but protein paste. The administratum considered this generous. We couldn't even pray properly. The shift lasted so long that the chapel services happened when we were working. A tech priest would walk the factory floor twice per shift, making the sign of the Aquila and blessing the machines with sacred oils and prayers to the Omnissiah. The machines received more spiritual attention than the workers. Sometimes I wondered if the Mechanicus considered us the less valuable component of the production line. My faith wasn't always hollow. I remember being 7 years old, standing in the great cathedral on level 200, staring up at the golden Aquila that blazed in the light of 1,000 candles. I remember believing that the Emperor sat on his throne watching over all of us, that our suffering had meaning, that we were part of something grand and glorious. The priests told us that every bolt we produced might kill a heretic. Every component we stamped might save a guardsman's life. Every hour we worked brought the Imperium one moment closer to victory in the eternal war. By the time I was 43, Those memories felt like someone else's life. The cathedral on level 200 might as well have been on Holy Terror itself for all the chance I had of returning. My children had never seen it. They'd been born into this grey existence of factory shifts and hunger, HAB unit walls and recycled air, and they would die in it too unless they were lucky enough to be tithed for the Imperial Guard. I used to think that would be a blessing. At least they'd see the stars before they died. Sarah kept our household shrine. A small alcove in the HAB unit wall held a crude aquila made from factory scraps, a printed litany of protection that had cost us a week's rations from a street vendor and a stub of candle we could light on holy days. She prayed every morning while I dressed for my shift, words murmured so quietly I couldn't hear them. I never asked what she prayed for. I was afraid the answer would break something in me that still needed to function. The toxin levels on level 47 had been increasing for months. You could taste it in the air, a metallic tang that coated your tongue and made your throat burn. People were getting sick more often. Old Miara, 3 units down, had developed a cough that sounded like tearing metal. She died in her sleep 2 weeks ago. The sanitation guild collected her body within 6 hours. The HAB unit was reassigned by the next day. Efficiency, the Imperium called it. I called it something else, but only in my head where the Arbites couldn't hear. I'd started noticing the mark 3 months before everything changed. Someone had scratched something into the metal wall of Corridor 17, the passage I took every day to reach the factory. It looked like graffiti at first, the kind of vandalism that earned you public flogging if the enforcers caught you. But it kept appearing in different places. On the factory floor, in the communal hygiene facility, scratched into the door of our HAB unit one morning when I left for shift. 8 points radiating from a central hub. I didn't know what it meant. Nobody seemed to know what it meant, or if they did, they weren't talking about it. The Arbites made one sweep, interrogated some people from the lower levels, then seemed to forget about it. Just another mystery in a hive city full of mysteries. Just another question nobody had time to answer, when survival consumed every waking moment. I should have paid more attention. I should have reported it. I should have done a dozen things differently. But I was tired and hungry, and worn down to something less than human by the endless grey routine of existence in the Emperor's glorious Imperium. So I ignored it, and went to work, and came home, and watched my children's ribs become more prominent through their thin clothing. The Emperor protects, they told us. From where I stood, he was doing a pretty terrible job of it. Chapter 2. Strange Signs. The dream started in the 8th month of the ration cuts. I'd never been a vivid dreamer before. Sleep had always been a dark nothing between one shift and the next, a temporary death that I welcomed after 16 hours of industrial hell. But these dreams were different. These dreams felt more real than waking life. I stood in vast spaces that couldn't possibly exist, halls of impossible geometry where walls met at angles that hurt to perceive. Colors existed there that had no names, shades of sensation rather than light. And always, there were whispers. Not words exactly, but meaning that bypassed language entirely and planted itself directly into my consciousness. They spoke of power. They spoke of freedom. They spoke of choice in a life that had offered me none. I woke from these dreams with my heart hammering and sweat soaking through my sleep clothes. But I didn't wake afraid. I woke energized, alive in a way I hadn't felt since I was young. Sarah noticed. She asked me if I was sleeping well, concern creasing her face. I lied and said yes. How could I explain that the best part of my day was when I stopped existing in our reality? The marks were multiplying. The 8-pointed star appeared everywhere now, sometimes crudely scratched, sometimes drawn in substances I didn't want to identify. The Arbites increased their patrols, but they couldn't be everywhere, and whoever was making these marks knew the hive's blind spots intimately. Someone was organized. Someone was planning something, and somewhere deep in my chest, below the layers of fear and imperial conditioning, something stirred with interest. Production quotas increased again. The Administratum, in its infinite wisdom, had decided that Complex 9-7 Alpha was underperforming. We needed to increase output by 18% immediately. When Foreman Drecht tried to explain that we were already running at maximum capacity, that the machinery was breaking down more frequently, that the workers were at their physical limits, the sector overseer informed him that excuses were a form of heresy. The emperor demanded more, therefore more would be provided. Physics and human endurance were details for the workers to overcome. We started running triple shifts without proper maintenance cycles. The accident rate tripled within 2 weeks. Mauro lost 3 fingers to press 34. Celine from sub-level 53 fell asleep at her station from exhaustion and was crushed when a loading servo malfunctioned. They didn't even stop the line anymore when someone got injured. The medic would come, do what they could, and production continued. Time was thrones, and thrones were all that mattered to people so far up the hive that they probably thought we were a different species. I found the pamphlet in my locker on a Tuesday. Someone had broken the cheap lock and left it there. A single sheet of synthetic paper with text printed in crude block letters. No symbols, nothing that would immediately flag it as heretical, just words that asked dangerous questions. Does the Emperor hear your prayers? Does the Imperium value your life? Is there power beyond Terra's dying light? You are more than a cog in an uncaring machine. Seek truth. Level 23, Sector Epsilon, midnight on the 7th day. I should have burned it immediately. I should have reported it to the Arbites. I should have done my duty as a loyal citizen of the Imperium. Instead, I read it 7 times, memorized the location, and hid it in my boot. The questions echoed in my head for the rest of my shift. Does the Emperor hear your prayers? I'd been praying for 10 years for things to get better. They'd only gotten worse. Does the Imperium value your life? I knew the answer to that one already. The ledgers valued me at precisely the cost of my replacement, minus the administrative expense of processing the transfer. That night, Sarah told me that little Thomas had fainted at the Youth Indoctrination Center. Malnutrition, the Medicae had said, recommending increased rations. When Sarah asked how we were supposed to increase rations that were already insufficient, the Medicae had looked at her like she'd asked why the sky wasn't made of gold. That's an administrator matter, he'd said, and dismissed her. Thomas was 6 years old. His arms were like sticks, and the Imperium had no answer except work harder and pray more. I started paying attention to the people around me differently, looking for signs of the same desperation I felt, the same hollow anger that was building in my chest like a slow-burning fire. I found it everywhere, in the eyes of workers who moved like automatons, in the whispered conversations that stopped when Foreman walked past, in the way people touched the 8-pointed marks when they thought no one was watching. We were a hive ready to explode, and someone was offering us a spark. The dreams intensified. The whispers became clearer, taking on distinct voices. One offered knowledge of secrets the Mechanicus hoarded, technological wonders that could end our suffering. Another promised power to reshape our reality, to take control of our destinies. A third spoke of pleasure beyond anything the grey life could offer, sensations that would make us forget our suffering. And the last, the loudest, the most seductive of all, spoke of simple, beautiful change. Evolution, transformation, the shedding of this weak flesh for something stronger, something that didn't hunger or hurt or feel despair. I found myself walking toward level 23 on the 7th day. I told Sarah I was picking up an extra shift for overtime credits we desperately needed. She believed me because she wanted to, because the alternative was acknowledging that I was lying to her, and our marriage was already too fragile for that kind of truth. I kissed the children while they slept, their faces thin and pale in the dim lumens light, and I left our HAB unit at 2300 hours. Level 23 was a dead zone, one of the dozens of sectors throughout the hive that had been officially abandoned due to structural instability or atmospheric contamination. Unofficially, it was where people went when they wanted to disappear from the Arbite's censors, where black market dealers and unlicensed preachers and desperate people gathered to do things the Imperium did not approve of. I'd never been there before. I'd been too afraid. too faithful, too convinced that following the rules would somehow lead to a better life. That conviction had died slowly over 43 years of evidence to the contrary. Sector Epsilon was a maze of collapsed corridors and jury-rigged lumen strips that flickered with unreliable power. The air tasted worse here, thick with mold and chemicals, and something else, something that made my skin prickle with instinctive unease. I followed crude arrows painted on the walls in luminescent paint, wondering with each step if I was walking into an Arbeitstrap, if this was how they were rooting out the disaffected and the desperate. I heard the voices before I saw the gathering. 30, maybe 40 people, standing in a circle around a man who didn't look like much. He wore factory clothes like the rest of us, his face unremarkable, his body showing the same signs of malnutrition and hard labor that marked all of us. But when he spoke, his voice carried a certainty I hadn't heard in years. "The Emperor sits on his golden throne and devours souls to sustain his corpse," he said. And the words that should have felt like blasphemy felt like relief. "We are told this is necessary. We are told this is holy. We are told our suffering has meaning. But ask yourselves, truly ask yourselves, when has the Imperium ever cared if you lived or died? When has the Emperor's light reached down to this level and offered you anything but more demands for sacrifice?" I stepped closer, drawn by the simple honesty of it, by the fact that someone was finally saying what we all thought in the dark hours before shift began. "There are powers beyond the Imperium's lies," the man continued. "Powers that offer true freedom, true strength, true purpose. Not the grey death of endless labor, but transformation, evolution, the chance to become something more than a numbered worker in an uncaring machine." He raised his hand, and I saw it clearly then. The 8-pointed star carved into his palm, weeping blood that looked almost black in the flickering light. The Chaos Star, the mark of damnation, the symbol of everything the Imperium had taught me to fear since I was old enough to understand words. And I felt, "Emperor, help me." I felt hope. Chapter 3. The Truth Revealed. The meetings continued every 7th day for 3 months. I became a regular, one of perhaps 50 people who gathered in that abandoned sector to hear Cyrus speak. That was his name, or the name he gave us. Cyrus the Enlightener, he called himself, though he discouraged us from treating him as anything special. He was just a man who'd seen through the Imperium's lies earlier than the rest of us, he said. A guide to help us find our own path to power. The things he taught us were intoxicating. He explained that the Imperium deliberately kept us ignorant, that knowledge was hoarded by the elite while we were fed propaganda and prayers. He showed us forbidden texts, data slates with information the Mechanicus claimed was tech heresy, books that described the warp not as a realm of horrors, but as a sea of infinite possibility. He taught us that the entities the Imperium called demons were simply beings of different composition, misunderstood because understanding them would undermine the Imperium's control. I drank it in like a man dying of thirst. Every meeting gave me more questions and more answers, each more dangerous than the last. Cyrus taught us meditation techniques that he said would open our minds to the warp's whispers. He taught us words in languages that hurt to pronounce, that felt wrong in my mouth, but powerful in ways I couldn't explain. He taught us that we weren't powerless, that reality itself could be bent by those who knew the right methods, spoke the right words, made the right sacrifices. The word sacrifice should have alarmed me more than it did, but by then I was too far gone, too invested in the possibility that my life could mean something more than factory shifts and slow starvation. Cyrus never asked us to hurt anyone, not at first. Small sacrifices, he said. A few drops of blood offered to the right entity with the right intentions. Small rituals performed in private, words whispered in darkness, marks drawn in hidden places. Nothing that would harm anyone but ourselves, and even that was minimal. A cut on the palm, a burn on the forearm. Pain offered willingly in exchange for power, and the power came. That was the terrifying, wonderful, damning truth. The power actually came. I performed the first ritual alone in our HAB unit while Sarah and the children slept, whispering words Cyrus had taught me, offering 3 drops of blood to a presence I couldn't see but could feel watching. The air in the room grew thick, and for just a moment, I felt something vast and ancient turn its attention toward me, like being observed by something so large that I was less than an insect to it, but it noticed me anyway. The next day at the factory, I worked my full 16-hour shift without feeling tired. My hands were steady, my mind was clear, and the endless thunder of the presses that usually left me with splitting headaches barely registered. I felt strong. I felt capable. I felt, for the first time in years, like I had some control over my existence. Others in the group reported similar experiences. Mara, who'd been suffering from a respiratory infection for weeks, woke up one morning breathing clearly, her lungs suddenly free of the pollutants that had been killing her slowly. Trent found himself able to go days without sleep, his body sustained by something other than rest. Celia discovered she could sense when machinery was about to fail, allowing her to avoid accidents that would have killed her. Small miracles, each of them. Small prices paid, small powers granted. Cyrus taught us that we were merely scratching the surface. The entities beyond the veil, the dark gods the Imperium demonized so effectively, offered powers beyond imagining to those who proved themselves worthy. Khorne offered strength and the courage to fight back against oppression. Tzeentch offered knowledge and the ability to change our circumstances. Nurgle offered an end to suffering and rebirth into something that couldn't be hurt anymore. Slaanesh offered pleasure and intensity of experience that could make us forget every moment of the grey life. The Imperium tells you these are evil beings, Cyrus said during one meeting, his eyes glittering in the dim light. But what is evil? Is it evil to want power over your own life? Is it evil to refuse to suffer for a corpse god who's never answered a single prayer you've offered? Is it evil to choose transformation over slow death in a factory? The Imperium defines evil as anything that threatens its control. I say we define it differently. It made sense. It all made terrible, wonderful sense. I'd been conditioned my entire life to accept suffering as holy, to view my powerlessness as virtue, to believe that questioning the system was the greatest sin possible. But what if that was the lie? What if the real evil was the system that ground billions of humans into paste to sustain an empire that cared nothing for them? What if rebellion wasn't damnation but liberation? I started teaching the meditations to Sarah. I couldn't hide what I was becoming anymore, couldn't pretend that the changes in me were natural. She deserved to know. I expected horror, rejection, fear. Instead, she listened with an intensity that surprised me. She asked questions, and when I offered to show her the marks, to teach her the words, she said yes without hesitation. "I'm tired, Marcus," she told me, her voice steady and certain. "I'm tired of watching our children starve. I'm tired of praying to an emperor who doesn't hear. I'm tired of being powerless. If there's another way, any other way, I want it." We performed the ritual together that night, our blood mingling in the small bronze bowl Cyrus had given me. The presence that came was stronger this time, more focused. I felt it examining us, judging our worthiness. And then I felt its approval wash over me like warm water. We were accepted. We were noticed. We mattered to something, even if that something was an entity the Imperium called demonic. The children were different in the morning. They had more energy, more color in their faces. The terrible hunger that had been hollowing them out seemed to have eased. I didn't understand how until I realized they'd been touching us, absorbing some residue of the power we channeled. They were being blessed by proximity, protected by entities the Imperium said wanted only to destroy humanity. Cyrus told us the time was coming soon. The cult had grown beyond our small cell. There were hundreds of us now, spread throughout the hive, all marked by the 8-pointed star, all touched by powers beyond the material. The plan was ambitious and terrible. We would take control of Level 47's power distribution, plunge sectors into darkness, and in the chaos, we would seize weapons from the local Arbeits garrison. We would fight our way down through the lower levels, gathering the desperate and the hungry, offering them the same choice we'd been given. Continue suffering for an empire that despised them, or embrace change and power. It would be violent. People would die. The Imperium would respond with overwhelming force. But Cyrus promised that we wouldn't be alone. When the moment came, when we proved our devotion through action rather than just words, the Dark Gods would answer. They would send aid from beyond the veil. They would transform us into something capable of standing against the Imperium's weapons. I believed him. Emperor, forgive me. I believed every word. I'd seen too much, felt too much, experienced too many small miracles to doubt anymore. The warp was real. Its powers were real. And we were chosen to be instruments of change in a stagnant galaxy. I carved the 8-pointed star into my chest one night, 3 inches across, directly over my heart. Sarah watched with approval. The pain was exquisite, and as my blood welled up, I felt something shift in my perception. The world suddenly had more dimensions than I'd been able to perceive before. I could see the currents of energy that flowed through the hive, the eddies of emotion and desperation that pooled in certain areas. I could feel the presence of my fellow cultists scattered throughout Level 47, bright points of chosen souls in a sea of blind humanity. I was changing. We were all changing. And there was no going back from this, not ever. The Imperium branded us heretics, traitors, damned. They were right about one thing. We had turned from the Emperor's light. But we'd turned towards something else, something that actually noticed us, actually empowered us, actually gave us the chance to be more than cattle waiting for slaughter. The uprising was scheduled for 3 weeks from the day I carved the mark. 3 weeks to prepare, to gather weapons, to solidify our plans. 3 weeks until we would either transform the hive or die trying. I wasn't afraid. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't afraid of anything. That should have terrified me more than it did. Chapter 4. Damnation Unleashed. The night of the uprising began with perfect silence. We'd planned for months, coordinated through secret meetings and coded messages scratched in hidden places throughout the hive. At exactly 200 hours, when the shifts changed and the corridors were busiest, 15 cultists in positions throughout the power distribution centers threw their switches simultaneously. 17 sectors of Level 47 went dark in an instant, plunging 60,000 people into absolute blackness. The screaming started immediately. People pushed and trampled each other in the darkness, panicking in that instinctive way humans have when their environment suddenly becomes hostile. But we moved with purpose, our eyes adjusted through meditation and ritual, able to see in conditions that rendered normal humans blind. We'd stashed weapons in a dozen locations over the past month, industrial tools that could double as weapons, homemade explosives created from factory chemicals, even a few actual firearms acquired through black market channels that ran through the hive-like veins. I led a cell of 12, including Sarah. We'd left the children with Mara, who was too old to fight but devoted enough to be trusted with the most precious things in our lives. Our target was the Arbeits Precinct Station on Level 47, a hardened bunker that served as the law enforcement hub for our sector. 20 Arbeits, standard equipment, garrison mentality. They'd grown lazy over years of policing people too beaten down to fight back. That was about to change. Cyrus had given me an autogun, an ancient weapon that looked like it dated back to before the Imperium, all rust and improvised repairs. But it worked, and I'd practiced with it in the abandoned sectors until I could hit targets at 50 yards in near darkness. The weight of it in my hands felt right, felt powerful in a way the bolt press never had. This was a tool for taking control, not submitting to it. We moved through the dark corridors in practiced formation, avoiding the main thoroughfares where panicked crowds could slow us down. The sound of alarms began to echo through the hive, emergency protocols activating as the administratum realized this wasn't just a power failure. Too late. We were already in motion, already committed, already damned. The first Arbites we encountered was standing post outside the precinct entrance. His shotgun held ready, but his attention focused on the chaos in the main corridor. He never saw us coming. Trent hit him from behind with a crowbar, and the man went down with a wet crunch that should have bothered me more than it did. We dragged his body into the shadows and took his shotgun. 1 down, 19 to go. The precinct door was reinforced plasteel, sealed from the inside, designed to withstand anything short of military-grade explosives. But we had something better than explosives. We had faith and will, and the attention of powers beyond reality. I placed my marked hand against the door and spoke the words Cyrus had taught me, words that tasted like metal and ozone and made my throat burn. The air around my hand shimmered, grew hot, and the plasteel began to corrode. Not melting, not breaking, but rotting like organic matter, the metal turning black and flaking away as if centuries were passing in seconds. The door collapsed inward after 30 seconds of this impossible decay. The Arbites inside stared in shock at the impossibility they'd just witnessed, their training not including protocols for warp-based entry. That moment of frozen surprise was all we needed. We poured through the opening, guns firing, makeshift weapons swinging. The precinct turned into a killing ground. I shot my first man at point-blank range. He was reaching for his sidearm when I pulled the trigger, and the autogun kicked hard against my shoulder. The round caught him in the chest, punching through his light armor, and he went down with a look of surprise on his face. I felt nothing. No guilt, no horror, no remorse. He was an agent of the system that had crushed me for 43 years. He was an obstacle between me and freedom. He was already dead. He just hadn't stopped moving yet. The fighting lasted maybe 5 minutes, though it felt both longer and shorter than that. Time does strange things during violence, stretching and compressing in ways that make no sense when you're trying to remember it later. When the shooting stopped, 15 Arbites were dead and 5 had surrendered. We secured them with their own restraints and moved on to Phase 2, the armory. This was the real prize. The Arbites kept enough weapons in their precinct armory to outfit a small militia. Everything from shotguns and stub guns to combat armor, and even a few grenade launchers. We broke the locks with the same warp-rotting technique I'd used on the door, and suddenly we weren't desperate cultists with improvised weapons anymore. We were an armed insurgent force. Reports were coming in through the Vox system we'd captured. Other cells were having similar success throughout the level. The local PDF garrison was mobilizing, but they'd need at least an hour to organize a response, and by then we'd be entrenched. Cyrus's plan was working perfectly. We were seizing control of level 47, creating a foothold that we could expand from, a pocket of true freedom in the heart of the Imperium's industrial hell. That's when everything started going wrong. The first sign was Trent. He'd been wounded in the fighting, a shallow cut across his ribs that should have been minor. But the blood flowing from it wasn't right. It was too dark, too thick, and it was moving. Not flowing with gravity, but crawling across his skin like it had independent volition. He scratched at it, laughing, saying it tickled. And then he started changing. His skin split like overripe fruit, and something else pushed through from inside. Not organs, not anything biological in the normal sense, but geometries that hurt to look at directly. Shapes that existed in more dimensions than my eyes could properly process. He screamed, but it wasn't a scream of pain. It was joy, pure ecstatic joy as his body underwent transformation that should have killed him, but instead was remaking him into something else entirely. The presence we'd been invoking, the powers we'd been channeling, weren't content with subtle blessings anymore. We'd spilled blood in their name, we'd proven our devotion, and now they were answering with full force, transforming their chosen into vessels capable of channeling even greater power. Sarah grabbed my arm, her eyes wide with something between fear and anticipation. Marcus, I can feel it. I can feel them watching us. They're pleased. They're going to help us. They're going to make us strong enough to win. She was right. Throughout the precinct, throughout level 47, wherever cultists had spilled blood and called on the dark gods, changes were occurring. I could feel it through the connection the ritual had established. A network of transformed and transforming souls, all linked by their devotion to powers the Imperium called demonic. We were becoming something new, something the Imperium's weapons weren't designed to fight, but the cost was becoming apparent. Celia had fallen to her knees, her body racked with convulsions as something rewrote her genetic code in real time. Her screams were inhuman, a sound no throat should be able to produce. When she stood up again, her eyes were gone, replaced by pits of absolute blackness that nonetheless somehow allowed her to see. Her hands had become claws, sharp enough to tear through plasteel. She was laughing and crying simultaneously, overwhelmed by the sensation of transformation. I looked at my own hands and saw changes beginning there too. The skin was toughening, developing a texture like scales or bark. The mark I'd carved over my heart was burning, not with pain but with power, spreading out from that focal point like roots through my flesh. I was being remade, reshaped into something that could survive what was coming. The Vox system crackled with panicked reports. The PDF was responding faster than we'd anticipated, and they weren't coming alone. Someone had managed to get a message out to the Planetary Defense Force, and military units were being deployed from the upper hive. We had maybe 30 minutes before we'd be facing trained soldiers with actual military equipment instead of local enforcers with shotguns. Cyrus's voice came through on the Vox, transmitted from wherever he was coordinating the uprising. "This is the moment, my brothers and sisters. The Imperium sends its warriors to crush us, but we are no longer the weak things they despise. We have been noticed by powers beyond their comprehension. We have been chosen for transformation. Show them what true strength looks like. Show them the price of keeping humanity in chains. For the dark gods, for change, for the freedom to choose our own damnation." The cultists roared their approval, a sound that had too many voices in it, too many harmonics that shouldn't exist in human throats. We were changing, all of us, becoming vessels for something greater and more terrible than we'd imagined. This was beyond politics now, beyond rebellion. We were becoming living breaches in reality, points where the warp could touch the material universe directly. I should have been horrified. I should have realized we'd gone too far, that we'd invited forces we couldn't control into our bodies and our world. But I felt only exhilaration, power flooding through me like electricity, every cell of my body singing with energy. I was strong. I was chosen. I was finally, more than just a factory worker waiting to die. The PDF hit our position with military precision. Flashbangs detonated in the precinct entrance, and heavily armed soldiers poured through the breach. They were professionals, trained and equipped for urban warfare, moving in textbook formation. Against normal insurgents, they would have been overwhelming. We weren't normal insurgents anymore. Trent, transformed into something that was only roughly human-shaped, took 3 last rounds to the chest and laughed. His claws tore through combat armor like it was paper, and his inhuman strength threw soldiers across the room hard enough to shatter bones against the walls. Celia moved too fast for human eyes to track, her transformed body capable of speeds that defied physics. The soldiers' targeting systems couldn't keep up with her, couldn't predict movements that weren't bound by normal muscle and tendon. I fired the autogun until it ran dry, then dropped it and drew the knife I'd blessed in blood and whispered words. It should have been an inadequate weapon against armored soldiers. But when I struck, the blade cut through armor and flesh with equal ease, each wound I inflicted glowing with a sickly purple light. The soldiers I wounded didn't just fall. They convulsed, their bodies rejecting the unnatural energy I'd infected them with, dying not from blood loss, but from their own cells turning against them. We were winning. Against all odds, against military training and superior equipment, we were actually winning. The PDF soldiers began to fall back, their discipline cracking in the face of enemies that shouldn't exist, that violated every principle of warfare they'd been taught. You could see the fear in their eyes, the horror of confronting something outside their understanding of reality. That's when the first demon manifested. It came through a tear in space that opened in the middle of the precinct, a rip in the fabric of reality that bled colors that had no names. The creature that stepped through was simultaneously beautiful and grotesque, its form shifting between different configurations too quickly for my mind to hold a stable image. It was what we'd been promised, what we'd been working toward, physical proof that the powers beyond the veil were real, that they had noticed us, that they were coming to aid their chosen servants. The demon spoke, and its voice was like music and screaming mixed together, words that bypassed my ears and wrote themselves directly into my brain. You have called, and I answer. You have bled, and I am pleased. Continue your work, my children. Show this false imperium the truth of change. Show them the power they have tried to suppress. More tears opened throughout level 47. More demons pushed through, entities of pure warp energy given quasi-physical form by the belief and devotion of their cultists. The uprising wasn't just a human rebellion anymore. It was a full demonic incursion, a breach between the material universe and the warp. We'd succeeded beyond our wildest dreams, and we'd damned ourselves beyond any hope of redemption. Chapter 5. The Choice Made. The PDF retreated from level 47 within an hour, abandoning the entire sector to us. They sealed the bulkhead doors, cutting off all access routes, and established a containment perimeter. Standard Imperial procedure for demonic incursion: isolate, contain, and wait for specialized units capable of dealing with warp entities. We'd effectively carved out our own kingdom in the heart of Hive Tertius, a pocket of controlled space where the Imperium's laws no longer applied. Victory felt strange. We'd taken our objective, proved the Dark Gods were real and willing to aid their faithful, and established a stronghold that would take serious military force to dislodge. But looking around the precinct at the transformed cultists and the manifest demons, I realized we'd crossed a threshold that couldn't be uncrossed. There was no going back to the grey life now. There was no pretending to be a loyal Imperial citizen, no returning to factory shifts and empty prayers. We were heretics in truth, chaos cultists by deed, and the only path left was forward into whatever transformation awaited us. The children were changing too. I'd retrieved them from Mara once the fighting died down, and the moment I saw them, I knew the warp's influence had spread further than intended. Little Thomas's eyes had taken on a faint luminescence, glowing with inner light in the darkness. Sarah's daughter Keller had developed marks across her skin that moved like living tattoos, symbols that rearranged themselves in patterns that made my head hurt if I watched too long. They seemed happy about it, showing off their changes with childish pride, not understanding the full implications of what had happened to them. Cyrus called a gathering in what had been the precinct's main assembly hall. Hundreds of cultists packed into the space, all of us bearing visible changes from the warp's touch. Some transformations were subtle, just enhanced strength or altered perception. Others were dramatic, bodies reshaped into forms that were barely recognizable as human anymore. The demons stood among us, their presence both comforting and deeply unsettling, reality itself seeming to bend slightly around their impossible geometries. "We have won the first battle," Cyrus announced, his voice carrying through the hall with unnatural resonance. His own transformation was advanced, his skin having taken on a crystalline quality that refracted light in disturbing ways. Level 47 belongs to us now. 60,000 souls live in this sector, and many of them will join us willingly once they understand what we offer. But this is just the beginning. The Imperium will respond with overwhelming force. They will send Space Marines or Inquisitors, or worse. They will attempt to burn us out of this hive with fire and faith. We must be ready. He gestured to the demons standing beside him. Our allies from beyond the veil will help us fortify this position. They will teach us rituals to strengthen our bodies and minds, to draw more power from the warp, to become weapons capable of standing against the Imperium's champions. But this power comes with requirements. The Dark Gods are generous to their faithful, but they demand devotion demonstrated through action. I knew what was coming before he said it. I'd felt the hunger radiating from the demons, the constant need they had for certain types of energy. The warp was a realm of emotion and consciousness, and the entities that lived there fed on intense experiences: joy, pain, rage, despair. All of it was sustenance to them. And we'd invited them into our reality, which meant we'd taken on the responsibility of feeding them. There are still tens of thousands in this sector who cling to the Emperor's lies, Cyrus continued, who pray to a corpse god and refuse to see the truth we offer. They are not innocent. They are complicit in the system that has crushed us for generations, and they will serve one final purpose: fuel for our transformation. Sacrifice, mass sacrifice. Not just blood offerings in private rituals, but wholesale slaughter of anyone who refused to join us. I felt the words land in my stomach like stones, the full implications of what we'd become settling over me. We were going to murder thousands of our fellow Hive citizens in the name of powers that fed on death and suffering. Sarah gripped my hand, her transformed fingers rough against my toughening skin. "We've come too far to stop now," she whispered. "The Imperium will kill us regardless. At least this way we take them with us. At least this way we matter." She was right. The Imperium showed no mercy to heretics, especially those who'd manifested demons. When the response came, it would be total. They'd kill every single person in this sector, cultist or not, transformed or not, guilty or innocent. Fire would rain from above, cleansing everything in flames. The only question was what we did with the time we had left. I made my choice then, consciously and with full understanding of what it meant. I chose transformation over death. I chose power over powerlessness, even if that power came from entities the Imperium correctly identified as monstrous. I chose to become the thing they'd always accused me of being. "I'm with you," I told Cyrus, my voice carrying clearly through the hall. "Tell us what we need to do." The hunting began that night. Teams of cultists moved through the sector, identifying those who refused to join us. Some saw the demons and the transformed cultists and fell to their knees in worship immediately, welcoming the chance to become something more than factory workers. Others ran, or fought, or barricaded themselves in their hab units and prayed to the Emperor for salvation that wouldn't come. Those were the ones we harvested. I killed my first unwilling victim in Corridor 27, a man named Parch, who I'd worked with for 15 years, who'd always been kind, who'd shared his rations once when my family was particularly desperate. He looked at me with tears streaming down his face and begged me to remember who I was, to remember the Emperor's mercy, to turn back before it was too late. I cut his throat with the blessed knife and whispered the words that would offer his soul to the warp. His blood glowed as it spilled, drawn into patterns on the floor that had meaning in dimensions beyond the material. A demon materialized near the pooling blood, drawn by the offering, and I felt a surge of power flow through me as it fed. My body changed further, muscles becoming denser, senses sharpening to supernatural keenness. I was being rewarded for my devotion. I told myself it was necessary. I told myself he was already dead anyway, that the Imperium would have killed him just for being in the same sector as us. I told myself a lot of things that night as I moved through the corridors, killing people I'd known for years. But the truth was simpler and more terrible. I was choosing this. Every death was a choice. Every sacrifice was me deciding that my transformation, my power, my rebellion against the system was worth the cost of human lives. The demons fed well that night. By morning, 3,000 souls had been offered to the dark gods, and the warp's presence on level 47 had strengthened proportionally. The barriers between reality and unreality were thinning, making it easier for entities to manifest, easier for the changed and chosen to draw power. We were transforming the entire sector into a domain where normal physics held only conditional sway, where the impossible became routine. Cyrus gathered us again at dawn. His transformation was nearly complete now, his body having become something that was more warp entity than human, sustained by power from beyond the veil. "The Imperium will assault us soon," he said, "but we are ready. We have become something they cannot kill with conventional weapons. We have become living weapons of the dark gods, and we will show them the price of 10,000 years of oppression." I looked at Sarah and the children. All of them were changed now, reshaped by the warp's influence into forms that were stronger, stranger, more capable than baseline humanity. Thomas's eyes glowed like stars. Keller had developed crystalline growths along her shoulders that pulsed with inner light. Sarah's transformation had given her a terrible beauty, like a statue carved from living flesh that had decided to move. "Are you afraid?" I asked her. She smiled, and it was the first genuine smile I'd seen on her face in years. "No, for the first time in my life, I'm not afraid. We're going to die, Marcus. The Imperium will kill us all, but we'll die as something magnificent instead of starving as something meaningless. That's worth everything." I pulled her close, and we stood together watching the children play with a manifested demon that had taken on a form like a massive hound made of smoke and colored light. They laughed as it chased them, their joy feeding it, their innocence already corrupted beyond recovery. My children, changed, damned, transformed into something the Imperium would kill without hesitation. I'd done this to them. I'd brought this into our lives. I'd chosen this path for my family, and now we would all walk it together into whatever end awaited us. The Vox system crackled to life. The Imperium was broadcasting a message to the entire sector, their words carried through emergency speakers that they still controlled. "This is Inquisitor Helmar of the Ordo Malleus. You have been judged heretic and traitor to the God Emperor of mankind. You have consorted with demons and embraced corruption. There will be no negotiations, no mercy, no quarter given. You have chosen damnation. We will provide it. Say your prayers, heretics. The Emperor's justice comes for you at dawn tomorrow. Tomorrow. We had one more day to prepare, to fortify, to transform as many people as possible into weapons capable of fighting what was coming. One more day to be something other than powerless factory workers waiting to die. One more day to matter. I spent it with my family, teaching them everything Cyrus had taught me about channeling warp power, about fighting with enhanced bodies, about survival in a reality that was rapidly becoming more fluid than solid. They learned quickly, their young minds more adaptable to the impossible than my 43-year-old brain. By evening, they could manifest small warp effects themselves, bending reality in minor ways, drawing power from the demons that had become our constant companions. That night, I carved a new mark into my flesh. The 8-pointed star, but larger, more elaborate, incorporating symbols that Cyrus said would tie me more deeply to the powers I'd chosen to serve. The pain was incredible, but I welcomed it, offered it up as prayer to entities that fed on sensation. My blood flowed in patterns, and demons gathered to watch, their attention a physical pressure against my transformed skin. I was becoming something new, something terrible, something powerful, and I had chosen it freely, with full knowledge of what it would cost me and everyone I loved. The Emperor protects. They'd told me for 43 years. But the Emperor had never protected me from anything. The Dark Gods, on the other hand, had given me power, purpose, and the strength to fight back against a system that had ground me to dust. If that made me damned, then I embraced damnation. Better to burn bright for a day as something magnificent than fade slowly as something meaningless. Chapter 6. The Hammer Falls. Dawn came with fire from above. The Inquisition didn't waste time with ground assaults or negotiations. They simply opened the primary ventilation shafts on level 47 and dropped incendiary charges, promethium canisters that exploded into liquid fire hot enough to melt plasteel. 30,000 people who hadn't joined us and hadn't been sacrificed burned alive in their HAB units in the first 5 minutes. The screaming was incredible. Even transformed, even hardened by months of ritual and sacrifice, I couldn't block out the sound of thousands dying in flames. Sarah held the children close, their enhanced bodies protecting them from the heat that was turning the sector into an oven. But their expressions showed they understood perfectly what was happening. The Imperium was delivering exactly the mercy it had promised. None. Cyrus rallied the cultists in the precinct's hardened sections, areas deep enough in the sector's structure to survive the initial bombardment. We had perhaps 800 transformed cultists left, along with dozens of fully manifested demons. Against us came the full weight of the Ordo Malleus. Inquisitors specialized in demon hunting, backed by battle sisters and specialized weapons designed specifically to combat warp entities. They breached our perimeter at 0800. Grey Knights, the Emperor's finest demon hunters, space marines who were themselves enhanced beyond normal humanity, but in the name of terror rather than the dark gods. They tore through our outer defenses like they were paper, their blessed weapons cutting through transformed flesh and banishing demons with simple gestures. These were warriors who'd trained their entire lives to fight exactly what we'd become. I faced one in Corridor 42, a space marine whose armor was inscribed with so many wards and prayers that reality itself seemed to solidify around him, the warp's influence sliding off his presence like water off treated metal. He was massive, 8 feet of ceramite and enhanced muscle, and his sword glowed with power that made my transformed body recoil instinctively. "Heretic," he said, his voice amplified by his armor's vox system. "You have embraced damnation willingly. There is no salvation for you now." I laughed, and it came out with too many harmonics, my voice changed by the transformation. "I never asked for salvation from you. I asked for the Emperor's protection for 43 years, and he never answered. At least the dark gods noticed me." The Grey Knight's sword came down like a falling star. I barely rolled aside in time, my enhanced speed the only thing that kept me alive. His blade cut through the floor where I'd been standing, leaving a wound in reality itself, the blessed steel so anathema to chaos that it damaged the warp-saturated environment just by existing. I fought back with everything I had: blessed knife, warp-enhanced strength, minor reality manipulation that I'd learned through ritual and sacrifice. None of it mattered. He was trained, experienced, equipped specifically to kill things like me. Within 30 seconds, I was on my back with his boot on my chest, his sword's point at my throat. "You were a factory worker," he said, somehow knowing this about me. "You could have endured. You could have remained faithful. Instead, you chose damnation and brought it to others. What do you have to say for yourself?" I spat blood and something else, something that glowed faintly. "I say that your Emperor let me starve while I prayed. I say that your Imperium valued me less than the machines I operated. I say that you call us heretics, but you're the ones who created us by crushing humanity so thoroughly that any alternative looked better than another day of your protection." His sword came down. I felt it pierce my chest, felt the blessed steel burn through my transformed flesh like it was acid. But I didn't die immediately. My body was too changed for that, too sustained by warp energy to fail from simple trauma. I hung there on his blade, blood and light flowing out of me, watching my life spill across the corridor floor. "The Emperor protects," the Grey Knight said, pulling his sword free. "He never protected me," I gasped, feeling my consciousness start to fragment. "Not once, not ever." I died there in Corridor 42 of Level 47, my body dissolving into warp energy as the material components that still anchored me to reality gave out. But death wasn't the end I expected. Instead of fading into nothing, I felt myself pulled sideways, drawn into the warp itself, my consciousness becoming something that existed in that realm of emotion and madness. I could see the battle continuing from this new perspective. The Grey Knights systematically destroying every cultist, banishing every demon, cleansing Level 47 with holy fire and blessed steel. I saw Serra fall, fighting to the last to protect the children. I saw Thomas and Keller torn apart by bolt rounds, their small bodies exploding into light and blood. I saw Cyrus finally cornered and destroyed, his advanced transformation not enough to stand against the Imperium's finest. But I also saw beyond the immediate battle. I saw other cells in other hives throughout the sector, cultists we'd been in contact with who were continuing the work. The rebellion we'd started wasn't ending here. It was spreading, metastasizing like a cancer through the Imperium's lower levels. Thousands of desperate people watching the Inquisition's response, seeing proof that the dark gods were real, that transformation was possible, that there were alternatives to the slow death of imperial servitude. We'd failed to hold Level 47. We'd failed to survive. But we'd succeeded in something more important. We'd proven it was possible to fight back, that the Imperium could be hurt, that the Dark Gods would answer if you called loudly enough. From my new existence in the warp, I watched the Inquisition declare level 47 cleansed. They'd killed approximately 80,000 people to root out 800 cultists. Standard Imperial efficiency, sacrificing hundreds of innocents to eliminate every trace of chaos corruption. The families who'd never joined us, who'd remained loyal to the Emperor, who'd prayed for his protection, they all burned the same as we did. The Emperor protects, they'd said. From where I existed now, I could see the truth of it. The Emperor protected nothing. He consumed and devoured and ground humanity into paste to sustain an empire built on corpses and lies. We'd been right to rebel. We'd been right to seek other powers. We'd just lost anyway because the Imperium had 10,000 years of practice at crushing exactly this kind of resistance. I felt something vast turn its attention toward me. One of the Dark Gods, noticing this fragment of consciousness that had survived its physical death. I felt its amusement, its approval, its hunger. I'd served well in life. Now I would serve in death. My soul claimed as reward for my devotion, transformed into something that could never die because it had never truly lived in the material sense. This was damnation. This was what the Imperium had warned me about for 43 years, and I embraced it completely, without reservation, because even this was better than going back to the factory floor and 16-hour shifts and watching my children starve while I prayed to an emperor who never answered. Better damned and noticed than faithful and forgotten. Chapter 7. What Remains? The Imperium declared victory within a week. Official records stated that a Chaos Cult uprising on level 47 of Hive Tertius had been suppressed with minimal casualties. The sector was quarantined for 3 months while tech priests and inquisitorial staff performed thorough purification rituals, then reopened to standard operation. New workers were shipped in from other levels to replace the dead. Production resumed at its previous quota. In the Imperium's vast machinery, level 47 was a minor glitch, quickly corrected and forgotten. But I could see the truth from my new perspective. The Inquisition had made mistakes in their cleanup, missing cultists who'd hidden among the loyal citizens, overlooking contaminated materials that carried trace warp influence. The seeds of rebellion we'd planted hadn't been completely eradicated. They were growing, slowly and carefully, learning from our mistakes. Jenna was one of the survivors. She'd been in Cyrus's inner circle, but smart enough to hide her transformation with augmented clothing and stolen identity papers. She'd watched as the Grey Knights purged our leadership, watched as the fire consumed most of the cultists, and she'd kept her head down and survived. Now she was gathering new followers, teaching them the meditations and rituals Cyrus had taught us, slowly rebuilding the network we'd established. I couldn't communicate with her directly. My existence in the warp was limited, constrained by rules I didn't fully understand yet. But I could observe, and through observation I could see the patterns forming. Jenna was smarter than we'd been. She wasn't planning an open uprising. She was thinking longer term, embedding cultists into positions of influence, corrupting slowly and carefully, rather than trying to seize control through violence. She started with the children. The Imperium's youth indoctrination centers were always understaffed, always desperate for instructors willing to work for minimal wages. Jenna got a position teaching basic literacy to children aged 5 to 10. She taught them their letters and numbers and proper prayers to the Emperor. But she also taught them to question, to notice the contradictions in Imperial doctrine, to see the suffering around them, and ask why it had to be this way. It would take a generation for her approach to bear fruit. But she had time, and patience, and the backing of powers that existed outside normal time. The Dark Gods could wait. They'd been waiting for millions of years. What was another few decades to entities that existed outside reality's normal flow? I watched other survivors too. Marcus Prime, no relation to me despite the shared name, had survived by being in a different sector when the purge happened. He'd gathered a group of factory workers who'd heard about our uprising and been inspired by it, even in its failure. They weren't trying to fight yet. They were learning, studying, preparing for the day when they would be ready to make their own attempt. Terra's Rejects, they called themselves. A chaos cult that operated in the spaces the Imperium didn't watch closely enough, recruiting from the desperate and downtrodden, offering power and purpose to people who had neither. They made sacrifices in hidden chambers, carved marks where the Arbites wouldn't see them, and slowly accumulated transformed believers. The Imperium's response to our uprising had inadvertently proven that the Dark Gods were real and could provide tangible power. Every attempt to suppress that knowledge only made it spread further. Workers whispered about Level 47, about cultists who'd gained superhuman strength, about demons that had manifested in reality. The Inquisition could burn the sector, but they couldn't burn the memory. From my perspective in the warp, I could see hundreds of similar groups forming throughout the hive. Our failure had inspired more rebellion than our success could have. The Imperium had showed its hand, demonstrated exactly how little it valued human life, exactly how far it would go to maintain control. And thousands of people who'd been on the fence, who'd been considering whether rebellion was justified, decided that yes, it absolutely was. I'd become something like a minor warp entity myself. My consciousness, sustained by the Dark Gods as reward for faithful service, existed now as a fragment of awareness that could perceive multiple locations simultaneously. I was spread thin, diluted across the immaterium, but I was conscious and aware in ways that transcended my physical life's limitations. I could see my children sometimes, not their physical forms which had been destroyed, but their souls, claimed by the same powers that had claimed mine. Thomas and Keller existed in the warp now too, transformed into something that was both more and less than they'd been in life. They were happy in the way that entities whose existence was pure experience could be happy. They didn't suffer anymore. They didn't hunger. They didn't fear. Sarah's soul had merged with mine in death, our decades together, creating a connection that transcended physical existence. We were still separate entities, but our boundaries were blurred, our consciousness overlapping in ways that made it hard to tell where I ended and she began. We existed together in the warp, watching the material universe, waiting for the moment when we might manifest again and continue the work we'd started. The Imperium called us damned. They were right. We were damned by their definition, our souls claimed by entities they defined as evil, our existence a violation of their carefully maintained reality. But damnation felt like freedom compared to what we'd endured in life. Better to burn in the warp's embrace than starve in the Emperor's service. I saw the new workers arrive on Level 47, young men and women who didn't know what had happened there, who'd been told it was a safe assignment, a chance to work their way up the Imperium's hierarchy through loyal service. They moved into the cleaned hab units, took positions at the factory presses, began their shifts not knowing they were walking on ground that had been saturated with warp energy just months before. Some of them would be sensitive. Some of them would hear whispers in the quiet moments between shifts. Some of them would find marks scratched in hidden corners that the purification hadn't reached. And some of them would be desperate enough, hungry enough, angry enough to listen when those whispers offered an alternative to the grey life. The cycle would continue. The Imperium created chaos cultists through its own cruelty, then punished them for seeking alternatives, then created more through the cruelty of that punishment. It was a perpetual motion machine of damnation, and I could see no end to it as long as the Imperium remained in its current form. From the warp, I could perceive the larger patterns. Across the galaxy, millions of worlds operated under the same grinding system that had destroyed me. Billions of humans lived in conditions that made rebellion not just attractive, but necessary for mental survival. The Imperium called it humanity's greatest defense, this wholesale consumption of human life to sustain the war machine. I called it humanity's greatest tragedy. The Dark Gods fed on this suffering. They thrived on the desperation and anger and despair that the Imperium generated through its very existence. In a twisted way, the Emperor and the Chaos Gods were in symbiosis, each sustaining the other through opposition. The Imperium's cruelty created cultists. The cultists' rebellion justified the Imperium's cruelty. Round and round it went, an eternal war that consumed everything it touched. I'd thought I was choosing freedom when I joined Cyrus's cult. From this perspective, I could see I was just choosing a different form of servitude. The Dark Gods were no more benevolent than the Emperor. They used their worshippers just as thoroughly, consumed souls just as voraciously, cared about individual humans just as little. The only difference was that they were honest about it. But even knowing this, even seeing the full truth of what I'd become and what it meant, I couldn't regret my choice. Servitude with power was better than servitude without it. Damnation with purpose was better than salvation through meaningless suffering. I'd mattered, briefly and terribly, and that was more than I'd ever had in 43 years of loyal Imperial citizenship. The factory on level 47 resumed production. New workers operated the same presses I'd spent 16 hours a day at, producing the same components, living the same grey life. They would pray to the Emperor and receive no answer. They would watch their rations decrease and their children starve. They would slowly realize that their suffering had no meaning, no purpose, no end except death. And when that realization hit, when they reached the point of desperation that I had reached, there would be whispers waiting in the darkness. There would be marks scratched in hidden places. There would be promises of power and transformation. There would be chaos, patient and eternal, offering the alternative the Imperium's cruelty made inevitable. The cycle would continue. The Imperium would create more cultists. The cultists would rebel. The Imperium would crush them, and the warp would grow stronger with each iteration, fed by the suffering of both sides. This was my legacy, not the failed uprising on level 47, but the proof that rebellion was possible, that transformation could be achieved, that there were powers willing to notice the powerless if they called loudly enough. Thousands of workers throughout the hive had seen what we'd done. They'd seen factory workers like themselves gain superhuman strength. They'd seen demons manifest in reality. They'd seen that the Imperium could be hurt. We'd lost. But we'd lost in a way that inspired others to try. And eventually, perhaps in decades or centuries, enough people would try that the Imperium's responses wouldn't be adequate. Enough people would embrace damnation that the warp would breach into reality permanently. Enough people would choose transformation over slow death, that the system would collapse under its own corruption. Or perhaps the Imperium would stand forever, 10,000 years becoming 20, becoming 50, becoming an eternity of human suffering in service to a corpse god and his eternal war. From the warp, I couldn't see that far. My perception was powerful, but not infinite. What I could see was the immediate future. Jenna would successfully corrupt more children. Terra's rejects would grow larger and more organized. The Inquisition would hunt them and kill many, but not all. The seeds of rebellion we'd planted would grow in the darkness of the lower hive, fed by the same suffering that had created us. And I would watch from the warp, a damned soul in service to dark gods, waiting for the day when I might manifest again and continue the work I'd started. The Emperor protects, they still said on level 47. The new workers repeated it like a mantra, like if they said it enough times it might become true. From the warp, I whispered back, he never did. He never will. But there are others who will notice you if you call. There are alternatives to this slow death you call life. Some of them heard me, not all, but some, and that was enough. Chapter 8. The Eternal Truth. I've existed in the warp for what feels like centuries. Though time doesn't flow normally here, it might have been decades or days. The distinction doesn't matter when you're a fragment of consciousness sustained by beings that exist outside time's normal flow. What matters is that I've had time to understand the full truth of what I became, what I chose, and what it means for humanity. The Imperium teaches that chaos is evil, that the dark gods are enemies of humanity, that anyone who turns from the Emperor's light is damned. They're not entirely wrong. The entities I serve now are not benevolent. They consume souls like humans consume food, use their worshippers like tools, and discard them when they break. They offer power but never freedom, transformation but never peace. They are, in their own way, as terrible as the Imperium itself. But here's the truth that the Imperium can never acknowledge. They created us. Every chaos cultist, every heretic, every person who turns from the Emperor's light does so because the Imperium's cruelty made any alternative attractive. I didn't wake up one morning and decide to worship demonic entities for fun. I was ground down by 43 years of suffering, by watching my children starve while the Imperium consumed souls by the thousand, by praying to an emperor who never once answered. The dark gods didn't corrupt me, the Imperium did. Chaos just offered me a way out. From my perspective in the warp, I can see the full scope of humanity's tragedy. Across a million worlds, the Imperium operates the same system that destroyed me. Hive cities where billions live in squalor. Factory planets where humans are valued less than the machines they operate. Agri-worlds where workers toil in toxic conditions to feed populations they'll never meet. Death worlds where simply surviving to adulthood is an achievement. All of it grinding humanity into paste to sustain an empire built on the corpse of its own ideals. And everywhere, in every corner of the Imperium, people reach their breaking point. They pray and receive no answer. They work and gain no reward. They sacrifice and see no purpose. And when they're desperate enough, angry enough, broken enough, the warp is there to offer an alternative. The Imperium calls this corruption. I call it consequence. You cannot treat humans like disposable resources for 10,000 years and expect them to remain faithful. You cannot let them starve while claiming divine protection and expect them not to look elsewhere for help. You cannot create a system this cruel and this vast without creating exactly the rebellion you claim to be fighting against. Chaos cultists are the Imperium's natural product, as inevitable as rust on metal or decay in flesh. We're not an external threat. We're an internal failure, the logical outcome of a system that has forgotten why it was built and cares only about its own perpetuation. I watch new cultists born every day. A factory worker on Armageddon who loses her child to preventable disease and asks why the Medicaid only serves the wealthy. A farmer on Series 4 who watches his crop quota increase beyond what's physically possible to grow and realizes the administratum doesn't care if he starves. A soldier on Cadia who sees his comrades die by the millions for an empire that views them as ammunition rather than people. Each of them reaches a breaking point. Each of them asks why, and the warp answers. I've manifested a few times since my death, called back into reality by cultists who knew the right rituals, spoke the right words, offered the right sacrifices. Each time, I existed as something between demon and human, sustained by warp energy, shaped by memory of what I was. I helped new cultists learn the meditations. I taught them the words that opened minds to warp influence. I showed them that transformation was possible, that they didn't have to accept the Imperium's cruelty as inevitable. Each manifestation lasted only hours before I was banished back to the warp, either by inquisitorial forces or by the instability of my own half-demonic existence. But hours were enough. I could teach, inspire, prove that rebellion wasn't futile, even if it was doomed. The Imperium considers me a cautionary tale. Look what happens when you turn from the Emperor, they say. Look how you damn yourself and everyone around you. They're not wrong about that either. I did damn myself. I did damn my family. We died horribly, torn apart by bolt rounds and blessed steel. Our souls claimed by entities that view us as barely more interesting than humans view bacteria. But we died having mattered. We died having made a choice. We died having fought back against a system that had crushed us for decades. And that, ultimately, was worth more to me than another 40 years of factory shifts and empty prayers. This is the truth I wish I could tell every desperate human in the Imperium's lower levels. You're going to suffer either way. The choice isn't between suffering and not suffering. It's between suffering with meaning or suffering without it. Between dying slowly in service to an empire that doesn't know your name, or dying quickly in rebellion against it, between fading away as a forgotten number in an administratum ledger, or burning bright enough that they have to send their finest warriors to kill you. I chose rebellion. I chose transformation. I chose damnation. And I would make the same choice again, knowing everything I know now, because at least I got to be something more than a cog in an uncaring machine. The Imperium will stand for another 10,000 years, probably. The Emperor will continue consuming souls to sustain his half-life. The Administratum will continue grinding humanity into components for the war machine. Space Marines will fight Xenos and heretics. Imperial Guard will die by the billions on battlefields scattered across the galaxy. And the whole vast, terrible machinery will continue because it's too large to stop, too entrenched to change, too convinced of its own righteousness to acknowledge its fundamental cruelty. And chaos will continue too. The dark gods will continue offering alternatives to people desperate enough to accept them. Cults will form, uprising will fail, sectors will burn. The cycle will perpetuate forever, each side feeding the other, the Imperium's cruelty creating the very rebellion it fights against. That rebellion justifying that cruelty in an eternal spiral. There's no escape from this, no solution, no way to break the cycle. Humanity is caught between two terrible systems, each as cruel and uncaring as the other. The only choice is which one you serve, and for most people, the Imperium makes that choice easy by being so crushing that anything else looks attractive. I exist now as a fragment of consciousness, sustained by beings I don't fully understand, serving purposes I can't completely grasp. I'm damned by any reasonable definition. I've lost everything that made me human. My body, my family, my individuality. I'm a tool of powers that care nothing for me, a weapon pointed at the Imperium that created me. And I'm still more free than I was operating Bolt Press 666 on Factory Line 42. That's the fundamental tragedy of the Imperium. That damnation and servitude to entities that explicitly consume human souls is still, somehow, preferable to loyal citizenship. That people like me can look at the full horror of what chaos worship entails and say, yes, that's better than what I had. The Emperor protects, they say, on a million worlds, but he doesn't. He never has. He sits on his golden throne consuming souls, sustaining an empire built on corpses and lies, while his most faithful servants suffer and die and receive nothing for their devotion except more demands for sacrifice. The dark gods are honest about what they are. They're predators, consumers, entities that feed on human suffering and emotion. They offer power, but never benevolence, transformation, but never peace. They will use you and discard you without hesitation. But at least they notice you. At least they respond when you call. At least they offer something tangible in exchange for your soul, instead of just demanding endless sacrifice for the privilege of suffering in service to a corpse. If you're reading this, if somehow this testimony reaches you across the warp and void and time, know this: I was you. I was a loyal Imperial citizen. I prayed and worked and obeyed and raised my children to do the same. I believed in the Emperor's protection and the Imperium's purpose, and it crushed me anyway. It valued me less than the machines I operated. It let my children starve while demanding more quotas, more production, more sacrifice. It took everything and gave nothing. And when I finally broke, when I finally looked elsewhere for help, it called me heretic and burned me alive along with everyone I loved. The Imperium will tell you I chose damnation freely. They're right. I did. Because the alternative was continuing to serve a system that viewed me as disposable, continuing to suffer for an empire that didn't care if I lived or died, continuing to pray to an emperor who had never once answered. Chaos is damnation. I won't lie about that. I'm damned. My family is damned. Everyone who followed us is damned. We serve terrible powers that care nothing for humanity except as food for their endless hunger. But we serve those powers by choice, with full knowledge of what it would cost. We weren't drafted. We weren't forced. We chose our damnation because it offered us something the Imperium never had: the chance to matter, to have power, to make a choice about our own destiny. If that makes me evil, then so be it. I'm evil. I'm a heretic, a traitor, a cultist who brought damnation to thousands. The Inquisition was right to kill me. The Grey Knights were right to purge Level 47. The Imperium was right to respond with overwhelming force. But I'm not sorry. Not for a moment of it. Not for the rituals or the sacrifices or the uprising or the damnation. Because for 3 months, I was more than a factory worker. For 3 months, I had power and purpose and the attention of beings that noticed me. For 3 months, I mattered. That's all any of us want, really. To matter. To have our existence acknowledged. To be more than disposable components in an uncaring machine. The Imperium can't give you that. It's too large, too bureaucratic, too focused on its own survival to care about individual humans. You're a number to them, a statistic, a resource to be expended in service to goals you'll never understand. The Dark Gods can give you that. They'll notice you. They'll empower you. They'll transform you into something capable of fighting back. The price is your soul and your humanity and any hope of redemption. But you're going to die anyway. Everyone dies. The only question is whether you die having mattered, or whether you fade away as a forgotten name in an administratum ledger. I made my choice. I chose to burn bright and damn myself rather than fade away in the Emperor's cold light. I chose chaos knowing full well what it would cost me, and I would make that choice again. Every single time. The Emperor protects? No, he never did. But the Dark Gods notice. And sometimes, when you've been ignored and crushed for long enough, being noticed by something terrible is better than being protected by something that doesn't care if you exist. This is the truth of a chaos cultist's life. We're not monsters born evil. We're humans broken by a system that values us less than the equipment we operate. We're the natural product of the Imperium's cruelty. The inevitable result of treating humans like disposable resources for 10,000 years. The Imperium created us. Chaos merely offered us an alternative. Choose wisely. Or don't. Either way, you'll suffer. At least make sure your suffering has meaning. The warp calls to the desperate. If you're desperate enough, you'll hear it too. And when you do, remember, I was where you are. I made the choice you're considering. And I'm damned now, transformed into something that exists outside normal reality, serving powers that care nothing for me. But I'm not sorry. Not for a moment. Better damned and noticed than faithful and forgotten. Always. I watch the galaxy turn from my position in the warp, and I see the pattern repeating endlessly across 1,000,000 worlds. Every day, somewhere in the Imperium's vast domain, another person reaches their breaking point. Every hour, someone whispers the first prayer to powers they've been taught to fear. Every moment, the cycle I entered continues, grinding humans into either faithful corpses or damned rebels, with no middle ground left for those who simply want to live. The Inquisition thinks they're fighting an external enemy. They're wrong. Chaos isn't invading the Imperium from outside. It's growing from within, cultivated in the fertile soil of human suffering, watered by imperial cruelty, blooming wherever hope dies and desperation takes root. Every factory that works its laborers to death creates potential cultists. Every administratum that cuts rations beyond survivability creates desperate people willing to listen to forbidden promises. Every moment of imperial callousness is a recruitment poster for the Dark Gods. I've seen it happen thousands of times since my death. A miner on Chogoris Prime working 16-hour shifts in toxic conditions, watching his lungs slowly fill with industrial pollutants the Medicae won't treat because he's not valuable enough. A scribe on Terra itself, yes, even on Holy Terra, processing death reports by the million and slowly realizing that the Imperium views human life as less valuable than the parchment he writes on. A mother on Krieg, who watches her children conscripted at age 10 to begin combat training, knowing they'll be dead by 20 serving an empire that will forget their names before their bodies cool. Each of them has a moment, a single instant where something breaks inside them, where faith crumbles and desperation takes its place. I can see these moments from the warp, bright flashes of spiritual crisis, that light up like stars against the background of humanity's dull suffering. And in those moments, if they're unlucky or desperate enough, they hear the whispers. The warp touches them, just briefly, just enough to show them there are alternatives. Most resist. Most cling to their faith despite everything, praying harder, working harder, believing that suffering must have meaning because the alternative is too horrible to contemplate. They die faithful, broken by the system, but convinced their sacrifice mattered. The Imperium calls these people heroes. I call them victims who never realized they had other options. But some don't resist. Some are like I was, ground down far enough that the whispers sound like salvation rather than damnation. They take the first step, perform the first ritual, speak the first forbidden words, and from that moment, they're on the path I walked. There's no going back once you've touched the warp deliberately. It changes you on levels deeper than physical, rewrites something fundamental about your soul that can't be undone. Jenna, who survived the purge of level 47, has become something remarkable from my perspective. She's been working her corruption slowly for what my mortal life would have measured as about 15 years. She's no longer just a youth instructor. She's infiltrated the local administratum, gotten herself assigned to ration distribution oversight. Small position, seemingly meaningless bureaucratic role that the Imperium barely monitors. But from that position, she controls who eats and who starves. She can identify the most desperate, the most broken, the most ready to hear whispered promises. And she can make their lives just slightly worse, push them that final step toward the breaking point where they'll listen to anything that offers hope. She's engineered 17 new cultists this year alone, all of them carefully hidden, all of them spreading the infection further. The Inquisition has no idea she exists. She's too patient, too careful, too willing to wait decades for her plans to mature. She's learned from our failure. We tried to fight the Imperium directly, meet violence with violence, and we were crushed immediately. She's fighting a different war, corrupting the system from within, turning the Imperium's own bureaucracy into a weapon against itself. I've manifested for her twice, called into reality by rituals she learned from Cyrus before he died. Both times, I could only hold physical form for a few hours before the strain of maintaining coherence in real space forced me back into the warp. But those hours were enough to teach her things I'd learned from my existence beyond the veil. Techniques for hiding corruption, methods for spreading influence without drawing attention, ways to serve the dark gods while appearing to serve the Emperor. She asked me once, during my second manifestation, if I regretted what I'd done, if I wished I'd never joined Cyrus, never carved the mark, never brought damnation to my family. Every moment, I told her, speaking through a form that was mostly memory held together by warp energy. And never at all. I regret that my children died. I regret that Sarah suffered. I regret every person who was killed in the purge, guilty or innocent. But I don't regret making the choice. I don't regret fighting back. I don't regret refusing to accept that the Imperium's cruelty was inevitable. She understood. That's why she's so dangerous to the Imperium. She's not motivated by hate or anger, or the kind of emotional chaos that makes cultists easy to identify. She's motivated by cold, calculated purpose. She wants to tear down the system that created her suffering, and she's willing to take as long as necessary to do it properly. The Imperium will eventually find her. The Inquisition will eventually notice the pattern of new cultists emerging from areas she's worked in. They'll investigate, discover her corruption, and kill her with the same overwhelming force they used on us. But by then, she'll have corrupted hundreds, maybe thousands, and each of them will corrupt others. The exponential growth of chaos infection is slow but inevitable, like cancer spreading through a body that's already sick. I see Terra sometimes, from the warp. Holy Terra, the center of the Imperium, the holiest world in human space. It's supposed to be a paradise, a shining example of what the Emperor's vision can achieve. The reality is horrifying in ways that make Hive Tertius look pleasant. 40 billion humans crammed onto a planet that was dying even before the heresy, most of them living in conditions that would be considered inhumane on any other world. But Terra can't admit to having slums and suffering, So they just call it something else and pretend the desperate billions dying in the lower levels don't exist. The irony would be funny if it wasn't so tragic. The Emperor's own throne world, the seat of imperial power, creates more chaos cultists per capita than almost anywhere else in the Imperium. Nowhere else has such a stark contrast between the golden spires of the wealthy and the crushing poverty of the masses. Nowhere else has such visible proof that the Imperium's promises are lies. You can't look up at the Imperial Palace from the lower hive levels and believe the Emperor protects. You can only look up and realize that he protects some people while letting others die in darkness. I felt other cultists from my original cell sometimes. Consciousness recognizing consciousness across the warp's strange dimensions. Trent is still around, transformed so thoroughly that his original humanity is barely detectable. He manifests more easily than I do, his soul having merged more completely with the warp entities that claimed him. He appears on battlefield worlds, drawn by the violence and desperation of war, offering soldiers who are about to die anyway the chance to take their enemies with them. The Space Marines call him the Desperate Saint, a demon that appears to Imperial Guard units on the edge of annihilation and offers them corrupt bargains. Accept transformation, gain the strength to survive, serve the dark gods in exchange for not dying like dogs in the mud. Most refuse, clinging to their faith even as death comes for them. But some accept, and they become vectors for spreading corruption through entire regiments. Celia manifests differently, her soul fragmented in death, scattered across the warp in pieces that maintain a kind of collective consciousness. She appears as hallucinations to workers in industrial environments, visions that show them the truth of their situation, that break through the numbing routine and make them see how thoroughly they're being exploited. Most ignore her, write off the visions as stress or fatigue, but some listen, and listening is the first step toward corruption. My children are lost to me in ways I can't fully comprehend. Thomas and Keller's souls were too young, too unformed when they died. They merged with the warp in ways that erased their individuality almost completely. Sometimes I feel echoes of what they were, fragments of personality floating in the immaterium, but they're not my children anymore in any meaningful sense. They're just parts of the chaos now, raw spiritual energy that sometimes remembers being human the way humans might remember being single cells. That might be the worst part of damnation, not the suffering or the transformation or the service to terrible powers, the loss of everything that made you who you were. I'm not really Marcus Vrel anymore. I'm a pattern of consciousness that remembers being him, sustained by entities that care nothing for my identity, existing only because I'm occasionally useful as a tool for spreading their influence. When I manifest, I wear his memories like a costume, but the thing doing the wearing isn't human and hasn't been since the Grey Knight's sword ended my physical existence. The Imperium is right about chaos in that sense. It does destroy humanity, not by killing the body, though that happens often enough, but by dissolving everything that makes a person an individual. The warp doesn't care about your hopes or dreams or personality. It cares about the energy you generate through emotion and belief. Your individuality is just packaging around the real resource it wants to consume, but the Imperium does the same thing through different methods. It destroys individuality through grinding routine, through crushing any spark of independence, through reducing humans to serial numbers and quotas and acceptable casualty rates. At least chaos is honest about consuming you. The Imperium pretends it's doing you a favor while it eats you alive. I watch new chaos cults form and fail over and over across the galaxy. Most last a few months before the Inquisition finds them. Some manage years if they're careful. Very rarely, one will achieve something significant before being purged, managing to take over a planet or corrupt an entire regiment or summon something truly terrible into reality. These are the ones that make it into Imperial records, the ones that justify the Inquisition's existence and the brutal responses they employ. But for every cult that makes the records, there are thousands that fail quietly, crushed before they achieve anything noteworthy. And the Imperium learns nothing from this pattern. They see each cult as an isolated incident, an external corruption that must be burned out. They never ask why so many people are willing to embrace damnation. They never question what it says about their system that serving literal demons looks attractive to so many of their citizens. A tech priest named Zavos recently contacted me through a ritual he shouldn't have known existed. He'd spent 80 years serving the Mechanicus faithfully, maintaining machines on a forge world called Metallica, believing that his devotion to the machine god and the Omnissiah would lead to enlightenment. Instead, he'd watched his body slowly replaced with augmetics, his humanity literally cut away piece by piece, until he realized he was becoming exactly what the Mechanicus claimed to worship: a machine with barely any organic components left. The horror of that realization drove him to seek forbidden knowledge. He wanted to understand what he'd lost, what he'd given up in service to the Omnissiah. And in seeking that knowledge, he found texts that spoke of the warp, of powers that offered transformation, that enhanced rather than replaced humanity. He performed the rituals, spoke the words, and contacted me because I'd been one of the first to be indexed in the records he found. Was it worth it? He asked, his mechanical voice crackling with emotion. His augmetic vocal systems weren't designed to convey. Did transformation through chaos give you what the Mechanicus couldn't? I manifested for him as fully as I could, showing him what I'd become. A thing of warp energy and memory, holding physical form through will and the attention of dark powers, existing in defiance of reality's normal rules. Not quite demon, not quite human, something in between that shouldn't be possible but is. The Mechanicus tried to make you into a machine, I told him. Chaos made me into something that transcends both flesh and metal. Whether that's better depends on what you value. The Mechanicus would have eventually erased everything that made you individual, turning you into an interchangeable part in their machine. Chaos will eventually dissolve you into the warp, erasing your individuality in a different way. Both paths end in the same place. The only question is which journey you prefer. He chose chaos. Of course he did. He was already damned by the Mechanicus's standards, already corrupted by forbidden knowledge, already lost to the faith that had sustained him for 80 years. At least chaos offered him the illusion of choice, the feeling that he was deciding his own fate rather than having it decided for him. I taught him what I could in the hours my manifestation lasted. Rituals to bind machine spirits to his will, techniques for corrupting technology through warp influence, methods for spreading chaos through the Mechanicus's rigid information networks. He's dangerous now, a tech priest who serves the Dark Mechanicum without anyone realizing he's fallen. He'll corrupt others, and they'll corrupt others, and eventually the Inquisition will notice and burn Metallica from orbit. But by then, the corruption will have spread to other Forge worlds through the very data networks the Mechanicus relies on. Information wants to be free, they say. Chaos information especially so. It finds ways to spread, to replicate, to corrupt everything it touches. Zavos will be one vector among thousands, most of whom don't even know they're spreading corruption. The Imperium can't win this war. That's the fundamental truth they refuse to acknowledge. You can't fight chaos with the weapons they're using because those weapons are exactly what create chaos in the first place. Every brutal suppression creates more desperate people. Every inquisitorial purge that kills thousands of innocents along with the guilty creates more people questioning whether the Emperor's protection is worth the cost. Every demonstration of the Imperium's callousness is a demonstration that maybe the Chaos Gods have a point. I've existed in the warp long enough now to understand its nature better than I did in life. It's not a place exactly, more like a dimension of pure information and energy, where thought and reality are the same thing, where consciousness shapes existence directly instead of requiring physical intermediaries. The Chaos Gods aren't individuals the way humans are individuals. They're vast patterns of consciousness, amalgamations of millions of minds and emotions that have achieved a kind of terrible coherence. Khorne is every moment of rage and violence across the galaxy compressed into a single entity. Nurgle is every instance of decay and despair given form. Slaanesh is excess and sensation made conscious. Tzeentch is change and ambition crystallized into purpose. They're not evil in any meaningful sense because evil requires choice. and they're more like natural forces than individuals capable of moral decisions. The Imperium creates them with every act of violence in war, every moment of despair in the lower hives, every excess of the wealthy, every desperate plan to change circumstance. The Emperor sits on his throne, trying to hold back the warp, while his empire feeds it with every breath, every thought, every deed. It's the most perfectly designed failure in human history, and I'm part of that failure now. I contribute to it, feeding the chaos I serve with every manifestation, every teaching, every cultist I help create. I can see the full scope of the tragedy, and I participate in it anyway, because there's no escape once you've been claimed. The warp doesn't let go of souls it's touched. You're part of it forever, whether you want to be or not. Sarah speaks to me sometimes across the dissolved boundaries between our consciousnesses. We don't have conversations the way humans would, more like sharing impressions directly, experiencing each other's perspective without the mediation of language. She's more dissolved than I am, her sense of self less intact, but she's content in ways that make no sense to the pattern of consciousness that remembers being Marcus Varel. She shows me the material universe from her perspective, and it's beautiful in ways I can't explain with words formed for human mouths. The warp's influence makes reality more fluid, more responsive to consciousness, more alive in senses that baseline humans can't perceive. She sees the potential in everything, the ways matter and energy could be reshaped with proper application of will. She's become something like a low-level warp entity herself, no longer human, but not quite demon either. Is she happy? The question doesn't translate properly to what she's become. Happiness is a human emotion, and she's not human anymore. She exists in states that transcend human emotional categories, experiencing forms of consciousness that have no names in any human language. But she's not suffering, and after the grey life we endured together, that might be the closest thing to victory we could achieve. The Imperium would call what we've become abomination. They're not wrong. We are abominations by any reasonable standard. We shouldn't exist. Our consciousness sustained past death by entities that feed on human suffering. Our very existence a wound in reality's fabric. But we exist anyway, and we remember being human enough to understand what our existence means. We're proof that the Imperium's order is failing. We're evidence that reality itself is breaking down under 10,000 years of accumulated trauma. We're symptoms of a galaxy-wide sickness that the Imperium both fights against and perpetuates simultaneously. And there are millions like us now, fragments of consciousness scattered through the warp, all of them remembering being human, all of them serving powers that will eventually consume them completely. This is the Emperor's galaxy, 10,000 years after his supposed vision of human unity and prosperity. A meat grinder that produces chaos cultists as consistently as its forge worlds produce weapons. A system so cruel that damnation looks attractive. A civilization that has forgotten what it was trying to protect and cares only about its own perpetuation, no matter how many humans it has to destroy in the process. I was Marcus Vrel. I worked bolt press 666 on factory line 42 in Hive Tertius for 16 hours a day. I prayed to the Emperor, and he never answered. I watched my children starve while I worked myself to death for an empire that valued me less than the machines I operated. I joined a chaos cult out of desperation, embraced damnation because it offered me power the Imperium never would, and died when the system I'd rebelled against crushed me with overwhelming force. Now I'm something else, something that wears Marcus Vrel's memories but isn't him anymore. Something that exists in the spaces between reality and unreality, serving powers I don't fully understand toward goals I can't completely grasp. I'm damned by every definition that matters. I'm a traitor to humanity, a heretic against the Emperor, a thing that shouldn't exist but does, and I would do it all again. Because in those 3 months between joining Cyrus and dying on the Grey Knight's sword, I mattered. I had power. I made choices that affected my world. I was noticed by beings vast enough to encompass my entire existence and small enough to care that I specifically had called to them. I was more than a number in a ledger, more than an acceptable casualty, more than a disposable component in an uncaring machine. The Imperium will never understand this. They can't comprehend that their cruelty creates exactly the rebellion they fear. They can't acknowledge that every Chaos cultist is a person they failed, a human they ground down until damnation looked like salvation. They can't admit that the real enemy isn't external corruption, but their own systematic dehumanization of the people they claim to protect. So the cycle continues. The Imperium creates cultists through cruelty. Cultists rebel and prove that Chaos offers real power. The Imperium responds with overwhelming force. More people see that response and question whether the Emperor's protection is worth the cost. More desperation creates more opportunities for Chaos to spread. Round and round it goes, neither side capable of winning, both locked in eternal struggle that consumes everything it touches. I'm part of that cycle now. I can't escape it. I can only participate, doing what I can to spread the corruption that I've come to understand is inevitable anyway. The Imperium is dying, has been dying for 10,000 years, will continue dying for 10,000 more. It's too large to kill quickly and too sick to survive indefinitely. The only question is how many humans it will consume in its long, slow collapse, and how many of those humans will choose damnation over death. I've chosen. Sarah has chosen. Our children, in whatever form they exist now, never got to choose. Thousands of others have chosen. Millions more will choose in the years and centuries to come. All of us damned, all of us corrupted, all of us exactly what the Imperium's cruelty made inevitable. The Emperor protects? No, he never did. But Chaos offers alternatives. Terrible alternatives. Corrupt alternatives. Alternatives that destroy everything human about you while pretending to offer freedom. But alternatives nonetheless, and sometimes that's all you need. The chance to choose your own damnation rather than accepting the one the Imperium offers. This is the truth of a Chaos cultist's existence, seen from the other side of death, understood from a perspective that transcends humanity, while remembering what it was like to be human. We're not the enemy, we're the symptom. The disease is the system that creates us, the Imperium that grinds humans into paste while claiming divine mandate. Killing us doesn't cure anything. It just creates more like us, fresh converts drawn by the same desperation that drove us. Continuing the cycle the Imperium can neither escape nor acknowledge. The war will never end. The Imperium will never win. Chaos will never fully triumph. And humans will continue suffering caught between two terrible systems, choosing damnation or faithful death because those are the only options a galaxy this broken offers. I was Marcus Frel. I chose damnation. And from my position in the warp, watching the pattern repeat endlessly across 1,000,000 worlds, I can tell you with certainty, given the same choice again, knowing everything I know now, understanding the full cost of the path I took, I would make the same decision every time, forever. Because at least I got to choose. At least I got to matter. At least I got to burn bright instead of fading slowly. And sometimes, in a galaxy this cruel, that's the only victory possible. The warp calls to the desperate. It always has. It always will. And as long as the Imperium continues grinding humanity into disposable resources, there will always be people desperate enough to answer. I answered. And I'm not sorry. Not for a moment. Not for anything. Not ever. This is the truth the Imperium can never acknowledge. We're not corrupting their citizens. They're driving their citizens to us. Every cultist is a person they failed. Every heretic is a human they broke. Every demon manifestation is proof that their system creates exactly what it claims to fight against. We're not the disease. We're the symptom. And symptoms don't go away until you treat the underlying illness. The Imperium will never treat that illness. So we'll always be here, offering terrible alternatives to desperate people, proving that even damnation is preferable to the slow death of imperial servitude, always and forever, across 1,000,000 worlds, until the stars burn out and the warp consumes everything. This is what it means to be a chaos cultist. This is the truth they don't want you to know. We were you. We could be you again. We're waiting in the dark spaces between Imperial control, whispering promises to anyone desperate enough to listen. And one day, if you suffer long enough, if the Imperium breaks you thoroughly enough, you'll hear us, you'll listen, and you'll choose, just like I did, just like millions before me, just like millions after. The Emperor protects? No, but chaos notices, and sometimes that's enough.